The controversy over oil sands crude goes beyond the building of a new pipeline. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, critics call the region the tar sands. Now that label emphasizes their view that extracting the oil harms people and the environment. But not everyone agrees. So we sent Energy Now's Michael Davie far north, right to the source, to get the full story.
Straight, straight, straight.
Meet Don Gorman. He's a shovel maintenance planner for Syncrude, one of the largest oil sands mining operations in the world.
There we go.
I've been working out at the mine sites for the better part of 15 years now myself, living in Fort McMurray now since 1980.
In the last decade, the population of his town, Fort McMurray, Alberta, has increased 80%, and about 95% of residents have found employment.
If it wasn't for me being able to secure employment in the oil sands, I don't think that we'd be as successful as we are today. I mean, it pays good money. It's a great job. It's rewarding.
Compared to conventional oil that most people think of, oil sands processing is very different. It's far more energy intensive, much more intensive on the environment, and far more complicating.
Complicating because the oil here is bitumen, a tar-like substance that can be hockey puck hard, and it's mixed up with sand, water and clay. To get to it, companies have to clear large areas of the boreal forest and then drill it out or dig it out with open pit mining, a process environmentalists like Mark Hewitt of the Pembina Institute say is too destructive.
Surface disturbance of oil sands mining it can't even be compared to conventional oil. It's a large open pit mine. The entire surface has been removed in order to extract this resource.
To release the oil from the sands, it has to be superheated and chemically treated.
Much more difficult to get oil out of it, much more greenhouse gas emissions, and a whole bunch of other impacts.
The US National Energy Technology Laboratory estimates that gasoline produced from Canadian oil sands puts 17% more carbon dioxide into the air than average gasoline. So this was actually a mine?
Yes,
right?
You're standing on an old oil sands mining area.
Don Thompson is the president of the Oil Sands Developers Group. He says oil sands emissions are overstated by the industry's critics.
We have reduced our emissions per barrel by 29% since 1990. Technology is what we have used to do that, and technology is how we will continue to improve in the future.
And by law, all companies must reclaim lands disturbed by oil sands operations.
I don't know any source of energy that does not have an environmental footprint, and oil sands clearly does. We don't destroy the land, we borrow it, and then we turn it back to nature, just as this area around here proves.
Since operations began in the 1960s, the industry has reforested about 10% of its footprint. Still, some in Alberta say the industry's already gone too far.
Growing up here was beautiful.
Fort Chipewyan is located on the Athabasca River, 175 miles downstream of the mining area. Mike Mercredi is a member of the First Nations community there and used to work in oil sands.
I drove the heavy haulers there, and I was actually good at my job.
But 6 years ago, Mercredi says he began to see the industry in a different light.
There's been no cancers in my family. And then my uncle was diagnosed with cancer and nobody knew where it came from. And then he ended up passing away. And then a couple of years later, my auntie was diagnosed with cancer and she passed away.
What do you think caused the cancer?
I believe it's the tar sands development.
But for Mercredi, the concern is not just about cancer. Unhitch this? Yeah. Fishing was once the mainstay of Fort Chipewyan's economy. But Mercredi says the huge volume of water used by the oil sand mining operations has impacted the fishing industry.
And then you can see the evidence on the ground. There are all those rocks exposed in the grass, and even on the sides with the shade where it's all bright colored. That's where it was all underwater before.
So the local fishermen have to go way further out into the lake to fish?
Yeah, further out where it's deeper.
And for Mercredi, it's not just the quantity of the water, it's the quality.
The pollution in the oil sand mine that comes out of the stacks around the oil sands where it's being developed goes into the air and then comes back down onto the snow. And then when the snow melts in the springtime in the runoff, it gets into the rivers, into the streams.
Mercredi believes the pollutants then contaminate local food sources.
Right now, no one's really sure, but everyone and our elders believe that it's from the tar sands.
This whitefish, as you can see, has a pretty severe spinal deformity.
David Schindler has been studying the impact of oil sands production in the Athabasca River.
This one has a big tumor on its back.
And what about this big guy over here?
This big whitefish has some mouth and eye deformities. And these, again, are quite common.
Last year, Schindler and a team of scientists released a study connecting oil sands mining to river pollution. In the water, Schindler found toxic metals like mercury and polycyclic aromatic compounds. Some of these compounds have been linked to cancer.
What we showed was that the industrial development in that area has increased those very dramatically. In some cases, it looks like 10 to 50-fold more, depending on the chemical. The concentrations we found are very small, but they are a big increase from the almost undetectable levels that were there to begin with.
A study by the Royal Society of Canada found no evidence of oil sands contaminants causing elevated human cancer rates. When Schindler's team released their findings, the Alberta government set up an expert panel to review the study. The panel said we generally agree with the conclusion, but they also said the health and environmental impacts of the oil sands development are still unclear and called for further study.
I wish it would stay the way it was, because it's a pretty good life. Once it changes, I mean, it's changed forever. It won't go back.
I think the oil sands are better for Canada. I mean, it creates new jobs, creates new opportunities, and as time goes by, you develop new technologies to make the oil sands a better commodity. I mean, I know it's not the best solution, but I mean, it's the solution that we have right now.
Oil sands production in Canada has tripled since 1995, and according to government estimates, the country may double its current output of heavy crude by the end of the decade. In Fort McMurray, Alberta, Michael Davie, Energy Now.
The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers says it supports more health studies in the oil sands region as long as they are, quote, led by the responsible health authorities and grounded in good health science. And the oil sands industry says the production process is getting cleaner. In fact, the plant outside Fort McMurray that converts oil sands into crude oil is spending $1.6 billion on new equipment to cut air pollution by more than half. The plant owner, Syncrude Canada, says the project should be finished next year.